This Jinx player is currently climbing to Master Tier on the EU West solo queue ladder with an 81% win rate, and there's a lot we can learn from them. They perfectly play around Jinx's strengths and weaknesses, which makes for a very consistent playstyle and super straightforward decision making, and I will now show you precisely how it's done. The runes and items are the exact same every single game, and for good reason, as you will see throughout the video. You want Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, Legend Bloodline and Coup de Grace with Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm secondary. Doran's Blade is your starting item, and from there you rush Berserker's Greaves and begin working towards your Kraken Slayer. Afterwards, you always get Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, Lord Dominic's Regards, and finally Guardian Angel in this exact order. As emphasized by the rune and item choices, Jinx is strongest in the late game and therefore has to be rather careful during the lane phase. Especially early levels, your follow-up potential on burst damage is essentially non-existent, so except for a couple of auto attacks, you really cannot get much payoff when your support makes a play. On the contrary, the Jinx lane itself is highly susceptible to early all-ins, as Jinx cannot fight back at all at that stage of the game, especially when Lethal Tempo is not yet stacked up. Our Jinx player tries to respect this weakness of the champion as much as possible, playing extremely conservatively when Jinx hasn't had her important power spikes yet. When Jinx's lane gets ganked by 4 people on level 2, she carefully kites with auto attacks while staying as safe as possible, making sure not to overcommit. Of course, you do what you can to protect your teammate here, but you never actually throw yourself in harm's way. By staying at a distance, you make sure you don't die, which is equivalent to making sure you don't fall behind in levels. However, all of this changes when your opponents do not have kill pressure in lane. Jinx's early damage potential in longer trades must not be underestimated, so when your lane opponent misses their spells and has no burst damage left, you should make use of that. With your Q, but especially if you manage to stack Lethal Tempo as well, Jinx will outrange most other bot laners quite significantly, which you can then turn into a comfortable health advantage. In some lanes, mostly when you play against Enchanter champions, the enemy bot lane will actually never have kill pressure, allowing you to bully them really hard with range advantage. Especially when you can fully stack Lethal Tempo, you can use the long side lane to force the enemy into a dragged out fight, and the longer a fight takes, the more likely Jinx is to come out ahead. Yes, Lethal Tempo is a rune that is commonly picked for its late game scaling, but in these less threatening farming lanes, stacking it to full is very much possible and very much deadly for the enemy. Our Jinx player here commonly creates openings like this by letting the wave push as close to the allied tower as possible, so the enemy is forced to farm far away from the protection of their own tower. Now when either Jinx lands her W or when your support lands a spell, it will be your signal to switch gears and start focusing down the enemy with auto attacks. They cannot compete with your stacked Lethal Tempo in a full 2v2 fight, so they have to run all the way back to their tower, giving you maximum time to damage them for free. This concept actually holds true even outside of lane phase. W is your go-to playmaking button, as its massive slow coupled with your long-ranged rocket auto attacks allows you to kite just outside the enemy's effective range. There is very little counterplay to this strategy, and the enemy would have to commit a lot of resources, like their flash etc., to stopping you. Conveniently, W also sets up Jinx's other basic spell, the Flame Chompers on your E, which is a deadly all-in combo in lane. Unless the enemy has an instant mobility spell, the Chompers are guaranteed to connect off of your W slow by itself, giving you even more time to hit them while they literally cannot defend themselves due to the range disadvantage. And you don't even need to aim your Flame Chompers perfectly to get good mileage. The hitbox will stay active for quite a while, so even when you place them slightly too far behind your opponent, they are still forced to awkwardly walk around them, which still results in free auto attacks for you. While Jinx's kit might look rather simple at first glance, her Flame Chompers are actually deceptively complex with tons of different applications. However, I would group all of them into the following 2 categories. The first category is Chain CC. By layering Jinx's E on top of an allied crowd control spell, you are guaranteed to land them for an extra long CC duration, which should buy more than enough time for you and your teammates to score the kill. It is the same idea as the WE combo, only that it is easier to pull off in exchange for requiring a suitable teammate. While Jinx is very strong with enchanters due to late game scaling, the Chain CC synergy makes her highly threatening with all-in supports as well. Turns out from level 3 onwards, you actually do get crazy hook follow-ups with this champion. Some enemies will also straight up do this for you and stun themselves by either using a channel spell or by entering stasis effects like Zhonya's Hourglass. Oftentimes these champions heavily rely on these effects, turning Jinx's Chompers into an absolutely brutal counter to them. The execution for the Jinx player is also super easy since the timing is very loose. Your Chompers stay on the ground for a total of 5 seconds, which should give you close to a 100% success rate on this follow-up. It's quite impossible to miss time. The second category of Flame Chomper applications is what I would call pseudo-terrain. In many situations, the spell is straight up a better Anivia wall. It doesn't block off yourself or your teammates in any way, while enemies can neither walk across nor dash over it while it's active. This provides Jinx with an important tool for self-peel, since you can completely counter assassins with dash-based gap closes, rendering them literally unable to get on top of you. While standing behind your Chompers, you can auto-attack melee champions for free, allowing you to contribute to the fight in a meaningful way even when the enemy would technically be strong enough to one-shot you. Our Jinx player here especially likes to fight in the jungle, since Jinx's Flame Chompers are large enough to block off entire jungle pathways. The enemy is left with 0 options, setting up easy kills for Jinx's team and allowing her to carry the fight from there. But before we fully explore how to play teamfights with Jinx, let's first talk about Jinx's ultimate. Very much like your W, your ultimate is a long-ranged sniping tool, just with a lot more damage. However, while analyzing the replays, I noticed that in roughly 90% of all cases, our Jinx player here outright misses with Jinx's ultimate. Seriously, I could make a whole compilation video of completely useless Jinx ultis just using the material at hand, but this player still keeps winning games regardless. The reason is that Jinx's ultimate is ironically enough her least important spell by far, since most of her power is in her auto attacks, and her W and E help her enable her auto attacks. R is just a neat little execute that you arguably could pass on and still do fine. Auto attacks are the real deal with this champion, and your runes and items accentuate that. This is why hitting level 9 is hands down the biggest power spike for this champion, since now you have 5 points in Q. The auto attack range in rocket form is now so big that you even outkite tower shots to some degree. As long as you have the mana to actually pay for your rocket auto attacks, Jinx's range allows you to fully dictate the pace of the fight. You should now also be able to clearly see why the rune Presence of Mind is so important, despite the fact that Jinx is auto attack based. You want to be able to stay in rocket form if necessary, and in some fights you actually have to at all times, or else the enemy would be able to get dangerously close. AD carries oftentimes get one-shot killed when the enemy can close the gap, but when combined with the move speed from Phantom Dancer, max rank Jinx rockets can even hold late game monsters like a level 18 Kayle at bay. And all of this, your max range auto attacks, your lethal tempo, the safety from your spells, and your items ultimately come together while teamfighting. The plan is always the same. You start the fight in rocket form and stay at max range. You never overcommit while safely stacking your lethal tempo and your Phantom Dancer, keeping enemies further in check with W and E. Staying safe is the #1 priority, but only until your secret weapon triggers. Jinx's passive. The sudden burst of movement and attack speed when the first kill drops is your signal to go fully on the offensive. Your DPS is then so high all of a sudden that it is actually more comparable to real burst damage instead of damage over time. But you can still deal it over time with no inherent cooldown, and no other champion in the game can withstand that. As long as you start out playing safe and wait for that first kill, for that first passive trigger, Jinx is able to carry pretty much any fight with her huge auto attacks. All the combat stats from your items and your rune page get exponentially more valuable when your passive goes off, allowing you to offset otherwise game-losing factors in teamfights such as gold or even numbers disadvantage. If playing AD carries with strong teamfight potential is exactly your taste, then you should also check out my Sivir guide by clicking the link on your screen right there.